Hello? There we go. Yeah, I'll talk about that very thing, the colors of hydrogen, which, by the way, the industry hates that we color hydrogen. But when you're talking about stuff like this, it really helps. So I'm just going to put up this first slide, which I use as a beginner. When you push the envelope, it wants to remain stationary. When I talk to Gen Z, they don't get it. What's stationary? What's a letter? But nonetheless, I still put it up there to remind myself that it's very true. When you're a pioneer in any technology sector and you push the envelope, it does not want to move. So I'm representing the Hydrogen Business Council today, and it's an organization that I used to be the executive director of, and then I caused too much trouble, so they kicked me upstairs to the board. So I'm the board now. So I'm on the board of that company as well, David. But I still cause trouble. So you can see some of our past sponsors and present sponsors. We're an all-volunteer organization, although we do hire students for specific projects, and basically also just to be our horsepower when we're involved in things like conferences, which we run every year. But we've been around since 2015. People come and go, but our chief issue is basically to raise awareness and also to basically advocate for a hydrogen future. And I don't want to give everybody a hydrogen primer because I'm assuming that everybody understands their high school chemistry, but nonetheless, I might touch on some of the high spots. So this is a slide I like to use because these are a lot of the applications that are in the works or already on the road. But it's very clear that hydrogen is one of those fuels that has niche opportunities that are business ready today. And there's a lot that won't come into fruition for at least another decade. Basically, it's because we don't have the infrastructure. So a lot of people have heard about hydrogen cars, but you know, hydrogen cars are fine, but if you're just in the city, electric cars are much more convenient for you. And there's not enough fueling stations for cars with hydrogen. But heavy transportation is a different thing entirely. So what's our mission? Our mission is basically climate change focused. We want to be part of the solution to address climate change and decarbonize our energy economy. So in terms of our mission, there's 3 key paths, and I've just mentioned them here. Replace diesel fuel for heavy transportation. And one of our projects was how to decarbonize the 401 corridor, which is one of the most heavily trafficked multi-lane highways in North America. And if you look at the emissions from that corridor, just to address it, and if any of you drive there today, you'll see that like one lane is all trucks. So getting those trucks to switch from diesel to hydrogen is part of our mission. It won't be easy. These trucks exist. They're being built. But again, not enough infrastructure to fuel them at this point. Bottom line, why don't they use batteries in trucks? Simply because it takes up too much space on board and too much weight. They work for cars, but the bigger you get, the economics don't work anymore. The other thing we want to do is have a clean energy source for industry that normally uses methane. And steel making is classic. The steel plant in Hamilton would require 800 tons of hydrogen per day if they were going to switch from methane to hydrogen. Right now, there's no one around who can supply that. So that's part of the missing piece. We want to help industry decarbonize, but in order to do that, we need to find sources of hydrogen. Oh, finally, the last one. We also want to help produce clean energy carriers from hydrogen. And by that, I mean methanol and ammonia, which is basically a transportable way to move hydrogen from one place to another. A little bit about the hydrogen policy landscape. At the federal level, I'm a little out of touch, so I won't talk about it very much. But principally, even the new government, I believe, is going to focus on tax credits for hydrogen projects. And that's everything from production to utilization, the whole ball of wax. If you're involved in producing hydrogen in a sustainable way and utilizing it in a sustainable way, there will be a way to get a tax break from the government. But here in Ontario, basically, and this is very hot off the press, the ISO is launching a $30 million innovation project around hydrogen, half of which will be directed to hydrogen applications that help the grid, i.e. perhaps supplying power during times of peak demand. And the other half is utilization, but utilization in a way that does not impact on times of high demand. And you can go to their website and find out what the qualifications are for that. It's generally known globally that Canada has always been a location for high quality hydrogen projects, products and services. And these are just quotes from people around the world. Like that train that you see right there is actually running in commercial service in Germany. And it's running with fuel cells that were made in Mississauga by Hydrogenics, which has been acquired by Cummins, but that's another story. That plane, manufactured in Germany, but uses Ballard fuel cells. Same with the bus, the hydrogen bus, Ballard fuel cells. And those buses are being exported to the US, California specifically. So let's talk about the colors of hydrogen. So this is like how from the top down, you get progressively more carbon intensive. So at the very top, we have white naturally occurring hydrogen. And at the very bottom, we have hydrogen from coal, which was a big thing. Back, the US DOE actually put a lot of money into gasification of coal to produce hydrogen. Not anymore. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the obvious ones here, like white hydrogen, yellow hydrogen, green hydrogen, but surprisingly, I'm going to talk a little bit about turquoise hydrogen too, from methane pyrolysis and why it should be classified as a low carbon intensity path to producing hydrogen. So geological hydrogen is a real surprise. This could be a game changer, but there have been places all over the planet where people have drilled for something else and hit high quality pools of hydrogen. And because the hydrogen keeps being reproduced, one could argue that it's renewable, or it's no less renewable than geothermal. And the only downside of it is we're not exactly sure where to find it yet, although they are identifying the correct geological conditions for it, plus the purity. Some places it's 90% pure, some places it's 20% pure. So that has to be addressed. But right now, there are a lot of companies that are starting to drill commercially for hydrogen, and one of them is here in Canada, in Saskatchewan, by a company called Max Power. So we're all watching with great interest. And what's the benefit? It'll be very cheap. It'll be pure hydrogen, zero carbon, and very cheap. So it could change the game and produce a kind of a floor price for hydrogen. The second one is water electrolysis using renewables. Well, we all kind of know about this one. And the challenge has always been the price of electricity, or in fact, the high price of electrolyzers. Oh, well, when I talk about electrolyzers, and pardon me for not going back at the beginning, for a lot of you who may not know how hydrogen and electricity work together, in a car that has a fuel cell instead of a battery, it's basically an electric car. Instead of a battery, you use hydrogen. Instead of having to recharge it with electrons, you recharge it with hydrogen. The byproduct is water. And that would work for all the other transportation applications I mentioned. So getting back to producing hydrogen through electrolysis of water, the only way it works commercially right now that we can see is if you use off-peak electricity, or if you use electricity that's co-located with a wind farm or a solar farm, so you're not paying the upload charges to the grid, the transmission charges, and all of the other charges associated with the grid. But in those particular cases, you can produce hydrogen at less than $2 a kilogram. And that's kind of a magic number if you want to compete with diesel for those in the commercial arena with trucks, buses, and even trains and ships. And finally, methane pyrolysis that also produces heat and solid carbon. If you take methane and through this process called pyrolysis, do not allow any of the emissions to be released, you get pure hydrogen that you capture, you get a high amount of energy, which you can use as an industrial process, and you get solid carbon. And that solid carbon can be in forms that are highly commercial, like graphene. Graphene, if you check, is a critical mineral. And there is a company here in Canada called Curve Energy that's producing hydrogen as a byproduct. It's actually after the graphene. There are other companies that produce hydrogen as a byproduct, but they're producing other high-value products like synfuel and other more exotic materials like deuterium, which are in cell phones and they're in server farms. So I guess I'm trying to say that if you have a business model that produces hydrogen and another high-value product, you can beat that price of $2 per kilogram. I'm reaching the end of my talk here, so I'm just going to mention a few projects that go coast to coast, and this is not entirely up to date, but I'll give it to you anyway. In BC, right now, we've got quite a few fueling stations for trucks. So they're getting to the point now where they will be able to fuel a commercial truck fleet that even crosses the border into the US, because some of those fueling stations also exist on the western side of the United States in Washington and Oregon and California. Alberta has the poster child for what a hydrogen hub should look like. And a hydrogen hub is where you have a whole bunch of suppliers, producers of hydrogen, and users of hydrogen clustered together in a way that it becomes economic because they can transport or even pipeline the hydrogen from one place to another quite easily. And so they are planning on a highway, again, just like I'm looking at a 401, decarbonized corridor for the 401. They have a highway from Calgary to Edmonton that they want to decarbonize. And they're moving very quickly on that. They've got the trucks lined up. They've got the fueling stations lined up. And they also have a prototype freight hauling locomotive that CPR developed that's all hydrogen. Because if you look at how freight is hauled right now, it's all diesel. And so that's another way we can decarbonize the rail corridors. Ontario, we now have at least 2 fueling stations, one at the airport, which was done chiefly through the GTAA. It's one of their environmental projects that they've been working on for over a decade. We have another one at Enbridge. And Enbridge, by the way, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure that they're using that process I was mentioning earlier about pyrolysis, because they also have waste heat that they're using at their facility. Atura Power has a 20 megawatt electrolyzer at Niagara, and they are lining up customers for that hydrogen. Quebec, again, you know what? I'm going to stop it there and just go straight to Atlantic Canada. One more. Atlantic Canada is building solar farms and wind farms only to make hydrogen. Nowhere else in Canada are they doing that. And it's commercial, and they're going to be exporting ammonia and hydrogen to Europe.